Imagine this. You sign up to fight for your country. You put on the uniform. You ship across the ocean to one of the deadliest battlefields in human history. And the whole time you're fighting two enemies, the ones in the trenches across from you, and the one standing right beside you. That is the story of the 369th Infantry Regiment, the men who would become known around the world as the Harlem Hellfighters. This is not just a war story. This is a story about men who gave everything for a country that, honestly, hadn't given much back to them. And somehow, through sheer will, through courage, through talent, they became legends. So let's get into it. The year is 1916. America hasn't entered World War I yet, but things are moving fast. When the U.S. finally joins the fight in 1917, Black Americans across the country face a painful question. Should we fight for a nation that treats us as second-class citizens? Many answered yes. Not because everything was fine, it very much wasn't, but because they believed that proving their valor on the battlefield might finally open doors back home. It was a calculated bet on the future. The 369th Infantry Regiment was made up primarily of men from New York, many of them from Harlem. Harlem at this time was a cultural powerhouse. Jazz was being born there, writers and artists were thriving, and there was a strong, proud black community pushing forward against enormous odds. These men weren't drafted, and they weren't dragged in. Many volunteered. They wanted to serve, and they were ready. But before they ever saw a single trench, they ran into walls. The U.S. Army in 1917 was deeply segregated. Black soldiers were generally not allowed to fight alongside white American troops. They weren't trusted with combat roles by their own military leadership. There was an assumption, a shameful one, that black men wouldn't perform well under fire. So when the 369th arrived in France, the American command didn't quite know what to do with them. They were used for labor duties for a while, unloading ships, building roads. Skilled fighting men reduced to a support role because of where they came from. That all changed when the French military stepped in and said, "We'll take them." France was in a desperate situation. They had been fighting for years. They had lost enormous numbers of soldiers. They needed men who could fight, and they didn't care about the color of anyone's skin to get that done. The 369th was transferred to French command, given French weapons, French rations, and most importantly, French respect. They were treated as soldiers. Full stop. And then they went to work. The regiment spent 191 days on the front line, more than any other American unit in the entire war. That's not a small number. That is grinding, brutal, relentless combat in the mud of the Western Front, in conditions that are almost impossible to imagine today. And they never lost a single man to capture. Not one. They never gave up a foot of ground. The Germans actually gave them a nickname, Bloodlustige Schwarzmänner, which roughly translates to bloodthirsty black men. The German soldiers genuinely feared them. If you want one moment that sums up what these men were made of, it's the night of May 14, 1918. Private Henry Johnson and Private Needham Roberts were on guard duty, just the two of them, in a small outpost in the middle of the night. Around 2 in the morning, a German raiding party attacked. We're talking roughly 24 soldiers. Roberts was wounded early in the fight. Johnson kept going. He used every bullet he had. When he ran out, he flipped his rifle around and used it as a club. And when that wasn't enough, he pulled out a bolo knife and kept fighting, alone, against a group that outnumbered him badly, until he had driven them back and rescued Roberts from being dragged away as a prisoner. He was wounded 21 times that night. France awarded Henry Johnson the Croix de Guerre, one of their highest military honors. He became one of the first Americans of any background to receive it. Back in the United States, he received nothing. No official recognition, no medal. He came home and struggled for the rest of his life. It wasn't until 2015, nearly a century later, that Henry Johnson was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor by President Obama. Here's something that often gets left out of the story. The Harlem Hellfighters didn't just fight, they also played. The regiment had a military band led by a man named Lieutenant James Rees Europe. And this band was something else entirely. They brought jazz to France. Real jazz, the kind that was still brand new to most of the world. French audiences had never heard anything like it. People were lining up to hear them play. The music spread, the culture spread, and in a strange way, the Hellfighters helped launch jazz as a global phenomenon, right in the middle of a world war. It's one of those details that makes you realize these were complete, Full human beings, not just soldiers, but musicians, artists, and ambassadors of something genuinely new and beautiful. When the war ended in November 1918, the 369th came home as heroes, at least in the eyes of New York City. They marched up Fifth Avenue in a victory parade, and Harlem went absolutely wild. Thousands of people lined the streets. There was pride, there was joy, there were tears. These men had gone over and proved every doubt wrong, and the community knew it. But the celebration had limits. Outside of Harlem, outside of that one parade, America was not ready to honor what these men had done. The systemic inequalities they had left behind were still there, waiting for them. Jobs were still hard to come by. Dignity was still something they had to fight for every single day. Henry Johnson, as we mentioned, never received proper recognition. Many veterans struggled with what we'd now understand as post-traumatic stress without any support system in place. The country they had defended didn't exactly roll out the welcome mat. Because the Harlem Hellfighters did something remarkable. They performed at the absolute highest level, under the most extreme conditions, while carrying a burden that no soldier should have to carry. The knowledge that the country they were fighting for didn't fully see them as equal, and they did it anyway. With discipline, with courage, with excellence. Their story is part of a much longer pattern of Black Americans serving with distinction in every single conflict in U.S. history, often while being denied the full rights of citizenship. The Hellfighters are one of the clearest, most documented examples of that paradox. In recent years, there's been growing effort to properly honor them. Henry Johnson finally got his Medal of Honor. There are memorials, there are books and documentaries. Schools are teaching this story, but honestly, more people should know this. The Harlem Hellfighters spent 191 days on the front line. They never surrendered an inch. They earned some of the highest military honors France could give. They brought jazz to the world. And they came home and kept fighting, not in trenches, but in the long, slow, ongoing work of demanding to be treated as full human beings. That's a legacy worth knowing, worth remembering, worth sharing. If you made it to the end of this video, drop a comment below. What part of this story surprised you the most? I want to know. And if you want more stories like this, history that doesn't always make it into the textbooks, hit subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from. I'll see you in the next one.